Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, May 21st instance of SIG Docs. I believe we don't have any agenda items today, but we can continue to take items as people go and work through component docs issues and WASI.dev issues. So that being said, is anyone interested in taking notes for today's meeting?
Happy to take notes.
Well, thanks, Eric. And then for agenda items, do people have any specific items that they want to add? Pete, I'm curious what thoughts you have and that have brought you to the group and whether that's a good place to start out.
Sure, yeah. So I work for Woven by Toyota. So Toyota being in the name should like gives you some idea. Uh, the idea is to Woven by Toyota's ideas, like how can we sort of upstream into greater Toyota sort of best practices when it comes to software, improving verification, validation, kind of like life cycle, shortening that because Toyota has a great sense of responsibility for all human life. So the idea of my getting involved with WebAssembly is that yeah, Woven has started to look into WebAssembly as a technology for use in automotive. This is also something I think that's going on more broadly in other companies and in other contexts as well, using WebAssembly in automotive. Some thoughts around this. I'm still in the process of doing this, but I'm putting together a proposal internally for working on some sort of best practices when it comes to using WebAssembly interface types for embedded. So this may have like I'm aware there's a book for it, and I've read it, and I've used it here and there when trying to kind of experiment with WebAssembly. But my thought process here is like it might be a way for Woven to get kind of like dip their toes a little bit into kind of the ecosystem, the landscape, try to learn how to work together with everyone by having sort of like a lower level of commitment initially of putting together maybe like, yeah, embedded sort of flavored best practices when it comes to WIT. So yeah, so it's like not something that I've gotten approved internally yet, but it's something that I've been like working on this proposal for like a couple months now. Just trying to like learn as much as I can to make the business justification to do that. So also the person that's leading the project that I'm on right now is JF Bastian. So he's part of the initial like WebAssembly stuff. I think he got like the AACM like SIG Plan award along with many others for like initial work on it. So he's definitely interested. Woven's definitely interested in the space. It's just I think personally I'm trying to figure out a way that we can kind of like engage in a way initially to sort of like learn more and try to contribute back, and then see kind of where that takes us. Hope that sort of made sense with my 2 to 3 minutes I went on there.
That's great. Thanks, Pete. I think a general best practice guide is not something I've seen come out of working groups yet or SIGs yet, and that's a great idea for having those references, especially for a space where people are kind of flooding it with WASM or trying to, such as automotive. So that's exciting to hear. And I think this group's great for just in general figuring out how to document and disseminate information. And I also know there's the embedded SIG that is focusing on embedded work too. So I'd be curious if you've also gotten to chat with them some too.
Yeah, I've had a bit of interaction with Chris Woods, sort of in like a one-on-one or one-on multiple kind of scenario, but I've not had a chance to attend the embedded SIG yet. Unfortunately, just like timing hasn't worked out. So, but yeah, it sounded like there would be interest there as well in such documentation. They are not currently using a runtime, I guess, or planning to too much in the embedded SIG, which is like amenable to WIT. But there are like, I guess, research projects going on that he knows about that are trying to use WIT and embedded and things. And so he was like open to the idea and thought it seemed reasonable. But yeah, he also pointed me in the direction of the documentation SIG and said, hey, like also might be good to chat with them and see if this seemed useful.
Awesome.
Pete, one thing that I think would be um, well, hopefully interesting for you and probably also really helpful would be um, if you just kept in mind to like point out parts of the docs that you found really confusing or not helpful or in need of improvement, because I think fresh eyes are often a great place to or a perfect fit for that. So like I know going forward you're probably going to be doing a bunch of stuff and contributing, but that's one of the things I feel like you can only do early, which is probably worth calling out.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. I was using some of the documentation, but because I was using like the preview of preview 3 stuff, like much of it was like not like in that nice format yet, or at least I didn't know how to access in that format. So I was like looking at test code and like trying to piece together how things were working and getting help from others that were already like using the preview of preview 3. You know? So, but yeah, it's a good point. I'll keep my eyes open. So, I mean, I don't know how you normally run this meeting, but I'm just kind of curious. I've looked through some of the documentation when it comes to WIT. Does this sound like useful, like something useful that could be part of that book or like a separate resource that's still under the Bytecode Alliance and the documentation SIG? I mean, generally, does that sound like it's filling a useful niche?
I think it's definitely filling a niche, and I think figuring out where it lives is kind of the next step. Whether or not that lives in the component book, I'm not sure yet. I think we'd have to see what what is produced, like what this best practice guide looks like. Um, but I think we can find a place for it. I kind of wonder if it better exists in, depending on what it looks like, whether it would better exist in wazi.dev. If it's more focused, well, probably not, but just thinking about more of the, yeah, where it could live. But I would love to, as you're working on it, we could take a look at it and kind of see where it fits. And we could always spin up another guide, like a best practices guide too, and try and encourage um, other groups or focus areas to also produce one. But I think we could put it in a component book if we figure out where it best fits.
Sure. Yeah. So, so I've identified like a few other people from a few other companies that would be interested in contributing to such a resource. Of course, I need to get like the okay from my management that I can peel off time to do this and try and like do this process. But so would like assuming that everything gets kind of approved and I get the thumbs up from leadership, would like a step then be to I guess essentially like submit a pull request to the repo that builds the book and kind of like carve out a section on maybe best practices as kind of a starting point.
Yeah, for sure. I think we should go ahead and create an issue on the component book just to like say where could we put best practices. For your guide, do you have a sense of what the general flow of it is? Like, how does it start?
No idea. No
Well,
idea. So no idea yet. So like the few people that seemed interested, they have knowledge of the component model much more than I do, and of WIT. And so I think they might be more like have more knowledge about where it'd be good to start with. So I suppose one path for that could be like, yeah, I reach out to them and I say, hey, like I'm gonna start this issue. Maybe you all can like give your thoughts in here, and we can sort of evolve the idea in that issue. I mean, does that idea sound reasonable?
yeah, I think that sounds very reasonable to create an issue on the component docs repo that is about creating a best practice guide for automotive. And everyone who's interested can kind of brainstorm on that issue. You could even link to like HackMD or Google Docs where people are doing other brainstorming, but having that be a home for the conversation sounds good.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Sounds good. Yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
oh no worries. Kate, I was wondering, what do you think about this going under like uh, advanced topics? I know this is like kind of far in the future, but embedded, like if we don't scope down to automotive and instead just think of like embedded, that's
Yeah.
definitely an advanced topic. And then whether whether the full guide lives here or like in some sort of like embedded specific docs repo or like closer to another project that wants to host it, we can at least link out from advanced topics.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And I agree that we will probably, I mean, reference is also a section we have, so it could live under there as well. But I think we can first just assemble the guide, and wherever we put it might not be its permanent location. And especially if we get more reference guides, that might extend to other to a new book or to a whole section just on that. So but yeah, advanced topics or reference can be an initial thought process of where we could land it.
Yeah, sounds good. And I agree with you, Victor, that so I wouldn't start with automotive. I would start with embedded because, like, yeah, I think that a lot of the same concerns would be shared. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of the concerns would be shared. And so I think it's better to start with a bit of a broader scope there. But the people I'd be bringing to the conversation, I think, are mostly automotive. But I know other people in other safety critical industries that may be interested as well. It's just the initial group that I'm aware of are mostly automotive.
Out of curiosity, do you see this guide being a living document? So something you see would evolve, the best practices would evolve, or do you see it almost as a white paper format where a coalition comes together, writes these best practices, and like almost it's published?
I mean, so I would see this evolving over time as like WASI evolved, right? So there's like Preview 2, Preview 3, others, and then like release candidate and so on. So I'd imagine that as things get added or there's like some breaking changes or that are removed, whatever it might be, yeah, I would imagine this would evolve over time.
Okay, that sounds good. I was just thinking if it was more of a white paper format, we could publish it in a blog, but a living document is certainly better, where it can be up to date. So that's definitely the best for the community.
Okay, so yeah, I'm walking away with like an action item to like open an issue. If somebody could link in the chat like the repo that I would do this in, that'd be much appreciated. So yeah, kind of gather the folks that I'm talking with, and then like open this issue. Cool. All right. Thank you much.
Thanks, Victor. Great, thanks, Pete. Any other thoughts on best practice guide? All right. Do people have other agenda items that they want to focus on?
I wanted to see if maybe this is after, but the that PR about the one that Ivan was working on for a while. I made the changes there, and I wanted to just merge it real quick. But I don't know if we want to look through it together, or because we don't have preview like functionality quite yet, but like so we can just kind of visually look at it. But other than that.
Are you talking about the ones from 2023?
Yes.
Yeah, we can do that synchronously right now.
Okay, cool. I mean, I can also just merge it. That's also fine. But along those lines, another thing I actually put in the chat on Zulip that I wanted to, I guess, surface here again was to sort of change how we merge on the repo. So like going for basically only squash merging, and then allowing people to. Oh, let me. I'll put a link in the chat to the post on Zulip. But basically going for, if no one's against it, going for only squash merging, and then allowing people to, like maintainers, to click the sort of like merge when tests finish kind of thing. It's like little thing, but I think I personally like that workflow. So just want to see if everyone's like aligned on that.
Yeah, I'm totally for it. One of the things I mean, I'm glad GitHub introduced merge queues. One of the things that Mergify did that was really fantastic was it actually made the PR body the commit log for the squash merge. But I don't think GitHub is going to give us that anytime soon.
Victor, there's a couple nits that I do think should be addressed that I just submitted.
Okay, awesome. I'll hold off on that then and get to them after the
It's just a capitalization thing because we created a new section header. Um, cool. Yeah, and thank you for updating the JS guide. That was great. We were behind on that. So yeah, that's probably ready to go too. And then we'll have a clean PR page, which we have not had in a long time. So that's pretty exciting. Open ground for new and the latest. And Victor, you were mentioning wanting squash merges. I was reviewing real quick that PR. Will you restate why you preference squash merging?
Oh, just it prevents a merge commits make it really hard to like rewrite history, and like just things get kind of like, if you want it to go backwards, it becomes impossible. I ran into this firsthand when I broke the build a little, like I don't know if it was like a month ago now. It was really hard to just go backwards because you obviously, once you start, you just, the merge commit messes everything up. And then also so there's, the three options, right? There's there's squash, there's fast forward, rebase and fast forward. I personally like respace and fast forward, but the thing is, some people like to work iteratively. So you just get like 50 commits. And if you just like naively, rebase and fast forward, merge all those, you just get 50 commits by, that like have like kind of not necessarily incoherent, but like made sense to the person writing the commits as they were working commits in main. So Squash sort of strike this nice medium with like having one sort of commit to match the sort of PR that came in, and you keep the context obviously by putting in the message, but you avoid having too many commits go in or having merge commits go in. So that's my rationale there.
Okay. I think I tend to prefer not squashing just because if individual commits are functionality that you might want to reference and again in the future, or for you want to revert a specific commit, sometimes that can be helpful, but I don't hold a very strong opinion. So that's fine with me. Yeah. Cool. I was thinking, unless people have other topics, we could triage some of the issues of the component book. I'd also be curious if there's any work we want to do in the wazi.dev book space, Eric.
Yeah, there are no major issues. I mean, there are a couple issues, but nothing super massive. But we could think through things that we might want to add or expand.
Okay, let's start with wazi.dev because the component book can be a little bit I guess we can go forever sometimes with that issue triage. So I'm just looking at the issues with wazi.dev to see if
There was also some stuff that Victor and I talked about a little bit last week that I think could enable us to maybe unrevert that commit like tied to registry usage. So whenever we could do that after yz.dev or yeah.
So for wazi.dev, I guess the thing that comes to mind for me, I'd be curious for you, Eric, is just like preparing for 0.3. Is there anything we need to keep in mind for that?
Great question. Who do you think we should be coordinating with to make sure that we're kind of getting the most up to date and certain story that we want to have there?
On timeline or?
I think we're good on timeline. Timeline is up to date as of a couple of weeks ago, but just on further elaboration of features, perhaps timeline, beyond the initial release, things like that.
I feel like we could create an issue that's called preparing for 0.3 and say that we're trying to get a summary for 0.3 that we can like post with the released interfaces and tag pertinent people in it. Like we could tag Joel and other people, and they can add sections about what's coming with it.
That seems like a great plan.
Are we missing any? So for 0.2, we have 0.2.2. There have been some releases since then, right?
Yeah, and we have on the interfaces page versions. Okay, on the roadmap page, we have releases past that, but it's not really reflected on the interfaces page. So that seems like that's where we need a bit of an update.
I like how the interfaces says what came with each patch one.
Yeah.
Patch change, that's pretty nice. For roadmap, interesting. It's interesting to have a previous releases section on a roadmap. But I guess it's demonstrating how the cadence is every 2 months.
Yeah, I think it shifted from also, projecting out into the future for those, and then that kind of coming to a close, and now focusing on the upcoming WASIA 3. So, there's a degree of redundancy here. It may make sense to simply move this O2 releases section over to interfaces, put it into the format that elaborates on the features with each one, as you said, and then leave roadmap dedicated to O3.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the release schedule, it would be good to keep because I assume 0.3 is going to keep that. So
Yeah.
2 months every first Thursday, try and move that into the WASI 0.3 section. Or just have it, that section can change from WASI 0.2 releases to WASI releases. And just have that say like occurrence of every 2 months, etc.
I like that.
Anything else on WASI.dev? Okay, let's switch back to.
I was
Okay.
just going to sort of sum up. I think these are good changes. I'll take them on as an action item in terms of updating the roadmap and interfaces pages. And then would anyone else like to put up the issue or for 0.3? I can do that.
I'm honestly seeing pretty good content in the upcoming WASI 0.3 releases section. So yeah, I think it's pretty, we've got a lot of content there, but might be good just to double check with them if they have like some blurb that they like to share out with 0.3.
Cool. So yeah, I'll take the action item for the updates and should be all good there.
Sounds good. Okay, back to the component book. Danny and Victor, y'all were mentioning having basically a way we can bring back in registry support. I'm assuming with cargo component in a way that feels somewhat graceful to readers.
Yeah. So I guess there are probably like a couple of reasons why like the revert happened. And actually I feel like when Victor and I started discussing it, it like turned into a bigger conversation. But I think we can like start maybe with like immediately like the things that would like need to be done. So first, I guess like there was that one issue in cargo component that I think you opened, Kate. And I think I commented on it with like the command that you would have to use for the to like, you know, have the scaffolding happen like upon like pulling the thing from the registry. So I guess there's like the combination of like using the target flag, but then also configuring things properly. And then also, I think actually some of the issues might have like also been that like I think that maybe the thing that like is in GHCR is like a component rather than a WIT package, because and so I don't know if I wasn't sure if that was what your intention was or not, but like maybe we should talk about that too and consider, because like I would expect it to maybe not be an implemented component and to be a WIT package. So that could also be like maybe a good like starting point to talk about as well. But I mean, regardless, so like the command, I'll just drop a link here too, so that way like people can see what the command is that I'm like recommending would be used if we wanted to use registries right there. But yeah.
Yeah, I pushed up the component because you should be able to get the WIT from the component. So the idea there is that you can use the same package to both practice composition and to use it for WIT. I think one of the issues with what I believe from was that the fact that the component does not have proper WIT, or like the most explanatory WIT attached to it is an issue with the cargo component. I think that was something that Peter was explaining to me, was that if it like the reason the finalized component was not in the expected format was also part of the issue too.
Yeah, so I think that like cargo component like frequently just like has a single world named root. So like if you're making a component with cargo component, then like you basically when you use the command and you use the target flag, you have to include the world name. And so in this case, like that component has WIT information, whether it's like correct or incorrect, I think is like a conversation, but like it is, if we wanted to publish a component that was made with cargo component, then the world that you would have to reference in order to like scaffold it out like would be that. But also I think that like the way that we're telling people to make that, I don't know, because there was like another issue too that was like WIT based like design or something like in the component book. I'm trying to, let me see if I can find it really quick. And I don't know if anybody
probably WIT
like,
first.
yeah, exactly. Reorganizing things in a WIT first flow. And so I think that like if we're doing things with that, with like the intention being for there to be a composition, that it could make sense for there to just be like plain WIT with like multiple worlds and interfaces in it. And then you could basically be like, okay, like this component is targeting this world from this WIT package, and like this world is targeting this other world from this WIT package. And like then the idea is like we can see that this composition can happen because of the fact that these components have compatible worlds. So I mean, I think from if you are grabbing things from a WIT package in a registry, then I think the command maybe makes more sense with the way that cargo component works. But I don't know. Like it could be any of them, but like regardless, this command should make it so that things work. If you like just use the target flag, so we could add things back and just have people create components using that command.
I think so basically you're saying even if I push up the WIT to, or make the package reference the WIT instead of the component, you still need this target flag?
Yes.
And you still need it to target the world root?
No, you would just put whatever world is the one that
Right.
you're targeting.
Okay, I would rather do that than add the world root in there, because we're going to need to explain why the adder world, like why that world became root all of a sudden.
Yeah, to be clear, I think that's what I'm recommending. When I say this command, I mean this command, but with a different world in it, because we published a WIT package instead of component.
I also may see if I could publish the component not using cargo component, and see if the WIT stays appropriately matched to its, like see if the component surface is appropriately matched to its WIT, because I do like the idea of having the components being hosted too, because that's kind of what makes Whackage really cool is that you can pull the wit from the component. But if we're trying to speed things along, then I'll just push the wit, and then in the future we can push the component when we have that figured out.
Yes, I think that everything that you just said makes sense, and definitely you should be able to publish it so that the world isn't root. And furthermore, actually, I think that if you use this command, I'm not positive on this. I think if you use this command to create a component from a world, then I think that when you use cargo component, it won't be root. Right. So if you published the wit to a registry, did cargo component new with this, then that output component, I think, would not have the root world. It would have the world that you referenced in the command, and then you could publish that one, and it would have the proper wit. I
When
think
you
this is
do,
like.
sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, I think that if you use the target flag, that might also get rid of the root keyword.
What is being scaffolded during new that target creates? Like, because cargo component new just scaffolds your project. So I'm curious what that target flag is scaffolding, because I would expect this to be a build difference, not a scaffolding difference.
So I think the interfaces that you're exporting, it does like wit bind gen on like the interfaces that are imported and exported in the world that you're referencing in the target flag.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that basically just like feeds
bind
the
gen
world directly into wit bind gen. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Okay. I'm surprised that okay, yeah.
It's like it is weird, and cargo component should be improved, but like I think that it's in a place where it makes enough sense that it's like documentable, and we can encourage people to make things with it. And then yeah.
That sounds good. Well, for next steps for that, I guess I can push up the wit or try and build the adder component this way and see if that changes things. But regardless, I can reopen the PR, on reverting the revert, and it should just be a couple different steps. Sounds like.
I think so. And I think that this also sets things up so that I think that there was probably a decent amount of information that's like encapsulated in that issue that I was mentioning about like organizing things from like a wit first perspective, but I think it could set us up to like have more robust like composition flows as well, if we like start doing these things this way. Like it could set people up to like to have like more advanced whack stuff, but that's like it can be later. There was also still a couple, so as we were talking about it, we started like also because I think the other thing that was like unclear about how to make it so that it shouldn't be reverted was like the config stuff. And like Victor, I think it's still not like all the way done, but he like made some progress on like having a flag. I think that actually there is already a flag that is being used by some commands, but not the new command, that lets you like pass in a registry string, so that way you can like not necessarily have to modify your config in order to use a specific registry, which like I think you have to configure things with like I had to configure things with the namespace mapping in order to use like the docs namespace and stuff. And so I think we talked around a few ways to make that better, both in the last docs call and then also like in the chat that him and I had afterwards. And I think that I ended up believing that the thing that actually makes the most sense is moving the like registry config stuff, maybe. And then this like got into like a bigger conversation, but I guess just to start off, like having the registry configuration maybe be like at the beginning of like the language support for components, and basically being like, hey, no matter like which language you're going to use, this is the config that is needed in order to interact with like the docs namespace. And basically like having that before everything, so that way it's kind of just like the very first thing you do if you're going to create any of this, if you're going to be like using the wit that like we recommend in any of these tutorials, this is the config you're going to want. So I guess I wanted to like ask how people feel about like moving the registry config section out of like the distributing and fetching components section, and rather like into just before we tell people how to start creating components in like chapter 8.
That makes sense to me.
Cool. So I guess like I might open an issue that like, well, or Kate, I think I might like wait for you to publish the WIT package, and then I might like open an issue that is essentially like, we're going to be using the WIT from this docs package. So this is what your registry config should be. And that could go in like the language support section. So that way it's just like there, regardless of what language the person is authoring their components in.
Wait for me to publish the WIT package and put up the PR, or just publish the WIT package? Because I can do that now if you...
I guess if you just like publish, I mean, I think it doesn't matter, but yeah, like I'll create an issue that is like moving, or it could be a PR too, that is moving the registry config section into like the part on languages. I guess like also, yeah, it ended up like getting us into like a further conversation where like we were noticing that kind of like section 6.1 is like pretty short, and I don't know like how much information is like in section 6.1, and that also section 6.3 like seems like it kind of belongs in like the runtime support section. And so we were like also wondering if like chapter 6 could like be, if it would make sense to like reconsider like the layout of chapter 6 a little bit in that regard. Basically, like, do we even need 6.1, and can 6.3 move into 8? And then that leaves us with, and then it like, you know, lets you ask like some interesting questions about like whether chapter 6, like creating and consuming components, like it would basically be a 2-section chapter at that point, I guess. And so then just like is like the identity of chapter 6 like worth considering if like it was reduced to only 2 sections. I don't know like if what I'm saying sounds nice, or like how people feel about what I'm saying, but yeah.
I think that the most kind of obvious one is kind of like 6.1. You just like we don't get much out of that section. So I think that's like a clear cut, and I feel like we can cut and then go from there if people agree on that. And then so I think that's pretty straightforward to like think about, or like grok and decide on. And then just going back a beat about the setting up the registry config stuff, right? So so before people get started with a language guide, having them essentially configure whackage before they start like writing code or writing WIT, I think is something probably worth thinking about. Just in general, like, is the first thing we want to show people setting up whackage and doing it the full way, or do we want them to like write / copy WIT into a file on their file system? And so I think that nuance is there. The unfortunately local config, which is something I was trying to fix for whackage, like in project config, doesn't currently work well. So you can't do namespace config or registry config from like the file inside the repo. So we can't give them a repo that's ready to go with Whackage. Technically, like technically we're not giving them a repo anyway. Like they got to like write the files or whatever. But I think that's the big difference is you either take some time, and again this is widely usable because it could apply over every language. You either take some time to have people add basically a file to the like home config directory, which sets up Whackage to use the docs to like be able to use the docs namespace, or what we have now is people write those files, right? Like they like make a WIT folder and like fill in this content, right? So that's the sort of like, I feel like that's the thing to sort of consider, right? Like when they come in, do they do some setup, use the ecosystem tooling, or do they like do the sort of more manual way, write files and then write their code? Both things are WIT first, obviously, right? Like they're either pulling the WIT using these sort of like industrial grade tools, or they are writing the WIT and then writing the code. They're either pulling the WIT, writing the code, or writing the WIT, writing the code. Yeah, so I think those two things, and then or that sort of dichotomy is worth considering.
Yeah, I think if we're going to start with them doing Whackage, we'll need to update all the language guides to use Whackage. Right now, even with cargo components, using cargo component, we still wouldn't use Whackage because cargo component would fetch that for us, right? Or is the fix that cargo component uses your local Whackage config to fetch it?
Cargo component currently uses your Whackage config to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we would need that for Rust, but we also would need to update all the other language guides to use Whackage to fetch the wait. I'm fine with doing a Whackage first approach there. We could also, kind of have a section under, I don't know, under language support, right, for language support that's basically like accessing example wits and discuss how you can either use Whackage or you can like manually pull it over and document both options as well. I don't know. I think just forcing people to use Whackage is fine with me. It's another step for people when they could just grab the wit. So yeah, either way, I'd be curious. Pete, do you use Whackage in your workflows?
The fact that I have to ask what it is indicates probably not. So the my understanding of Woven's usage and kind of exploration of WebAssembly is like there was an effort like 2 to 3 years ago maybe that went kind of dormant, and I don't know if it ever raised to the surface level of interacting with the Bytecode Alliance, but it kind of went dormant when like priorities changed and things shifted around internally, organizationally. So our organization is like fairly green, I would say, when it comes to using WebAssembly. Like, of course, we have JF there, and I'm learning more by talking with folks. But no, I do not even know what Whackage is, unfortunately. Apologies.
No worries. I just linked the documentation within the component book about it, but it stands for WASM package tools, and it makes it easy to publish and fetch WIT and components from OCI registries, or also Word registries.
We are early
But
days. We are
yeah.
early days. We're not to that level of sophistication, I would say, yet. So yeah, but yeah, thanks for pointing it out. I'll bring it back with me as something that we can try to use.
Within your team, do you all share WIT just by having it in your repo? Essentially, you all like.
You don't want to know at this point how we're working. I can share this much, which is just that we're targeting a platform which is currently not supported by any runtime, whether it be WAMR, Wasmtime, anything. It's a new platform for safety critical. I guess it's not new, but the process we're undergoing is new. To our knowledge, it's not been deployed there yet. I don't know how much I can talk about that platform here openly. I guess I have to go back and like maybe ask about that, but it's a safety critical platform. And so we short term are using Whammer because it is more easily ported to this platform. But we have an internal process that's ongoing in like the medium term to move to WASM time. So that's kind of the shape of things, but like, yeah, timelines around all this stuff is it's still being sorted out, but that's kind of the general idea is like start with Whammer because it's easier to port to this platform. But then like gradually shift over to WASM time when that is then available. And then that would then allow us to do things like, like use WIT. Right. So currently we are not using WIT.
hearing this makes me actually think that the whackage section, like normally I think I'd be on the side of having people like write WIT to get familiar with it and feel kind of comfortable with it. But hearing that, it seems like the other way is actually much better. Like we should maybe introduce whackage as early as possible, so that people at least like somehow know it exists. It's another step which makes me like hesitate, like another like, oh, go like make this file slash, put these lines in it. You don't know what the lines mean, but you need them. And, then use this tool that, you need to download. Don't worry how it works. It'll work, like that kind of thing. Ignore the error messages or warnings that come out. But I think this makes me think that just the vast majority of people are going to be pulling WITs rather than writing WITs. And maybe it makes more sense to introduce again, this also puts like more pressure on the tool to be good, right? Like if the first, thing they run isn't great, then people probably won't be excited, will be, or dramatically less excited. But assuming, whackage works well, then getting people familiar with the thing you use to pull the interfaces, which are kind of, half of the point, or a large part of the point of using the component model. It's good for people to know the tooling exists, because it seems like otherwise they just wouldn't find it.
I think also just with respect to there being like an extra whackage step, ideally we should be, if language tools aren't leveraging whackage themselves the same way as cargo component, I think the design of whackage was such that every language toolchain should have a dependency on whackage. And whackage can be leveraged by every language toolchain. So like if we need to include a whackage step, there should be like a matrix of languages that require you to have a whackage step, and then we should be like engaging the people behind the language specific tools to be like, hey, like what would it take for you to prioritize having whackage incorporated into your tools so that users don't need to have a whackage step. Yeah.
I'm pretty persuaded by the point about simply letting people know that this pretty essential tooling exists. I think that's been a gap in the past, and this is a great way to communicate, hey, that gap has been filled more than you might realize. It just makes a lot of sense.
Oh, and that second thing, how do we feel about section 6.1?
Yeah, I'd find nuking it. For the PR that does that, and see if other people have opposition.
Does it also make sense to consider moving quite a bit of 6.3, if not all of 6.3, into the like runtime section?
Where would it go in the runtime section?
I think it would be, so I mean, like the part that is just like saying wasm time run with like a path to the file, I think could go into the wasm time section. I don't think that there is a way to do custom exports with wasm time right now, at least as far as I know. So you would like, that would have to be in the J code section. Or I guess you could like use the, yeah, you can use the library, but yeah, in bit I think it would basically be split across like 8 and 9.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that seems reasonable to me. I think that could also be something someone takes on, whether an issue or PR, and get more feedback asynchronously. I think part of what that section is trying to do is explain through sections the life cycle of being a component developer. Do you see like those words of, it's like you author, then you compose, then you run, then you distribute? And I think we need somehow of like, and it's trying to then point to other parts. Like it could then point to other parts of the book that then tell you how you actually do that. But I do think there's something there that we should make sure is put somewhere else in the book, that basically is like, what is the life cycle of being a component developer? And what are my tools for each of these steps within the life cycle?
That makes sense. And I like that that's like a thing that is like what the section is trying to do. I don't know if it is, yeah, that is nice context, because I'm not sure that I'm getting that from the section like as it currently stands. And yeah, well, because I think that also, like when Victor and I were talking about like, you know, how to make the whackage stuff as like frictionless as possible, and we were talking about moving the like registry config into chapter 5, and then we're just like, we're looking at it, we're like, okay, so if you like moved that big part of 6.4 into 5, and you just nuked 6.1, and you got like this like runtime specific stuff, it like kind of leaves 6 like pretty bare bones. And also like 5 is kind of creating components, and so it just was making me like kind of think about just like the identity of 6 of being like more of a like real world components, or like components out in the wild. Like how do you actually practically like leverage components in real software, rather than just like tutorials where we're like proving that like you can like have a dependency on a component, right? But like actually being like what, like establishing workflows. And so like I feel like if, yeah, it could make sense to like think about like how to, but like while if we're talking about ways to like simplify chapter 6, or put sections of chapter 6 into other sections where they might be closer to things that want to reference them, it could happen in the context of this like larger conversation of like bolstering up 6 to be like real world WASM workflows, you know. But I didn't, just kind of like going off the cuff there, but that's, yeah, like I don't think that the book currently leaves people thinking I would actually use this in a real workflow, and this is how I would do it, you know.
So very specifically about 6.3, I wanted to note that the running components with custom export section is out of date. We actually now have wasm time run invoke, right? There was just a blog post that should have hit bytecodealliance.org, I think maybe, on that. So we actually, there is a way now to, like, you don't have to do this composition step just to get a WASI run and then run the thing. You can actually run reactors directly with wasm time now. That's obviously a fresh feature, but wanted to note that just like for everyone, so everyone knows in general, because I think people have seen the blog post, but I think that's what that section was trying to do. And then I was thinking that 6.3 would just go right under wasm time, because like I think it's all just, that's just like running components is just wasm time instructions at this point.
Yeah, I think
so
especially with that,
that
I
was
actually
my thought on
didn't know about that blog post. Which also, I'm
let me
curious a
link it.
little bit about like complex wit types, like feeding those into like function things, like in the command line.
They use Wave.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really rad and awesome to hear. But yeah, like, so I think like yeah, with that, it could like totally all go into wasn't time. But yeah, I think also just like a decent amount of what I wanted to communicate was like having some thoughts about this. And like Victor was kind of like, oh yeah, you should like open up a bunch of issues. And I was kind of like, oh, these issues are going to sound like just like ripping apart chapter 6, which like I'm not like trying to do, but or I don't know, I wanted to provide some context before I like open some of these issues to like get rid of sections and
Danny,
stuff.
I don't really think you should worry about that. This book is very out of date and has not been maintained. Those sections clearly need to go. So yeah, that sounds great. I think getting rid of 6.1, that's one quick check someone can do. 6.3, honestly, we could just delete it, especially given it's out of date. And I really think we need to improve the runtime support sections like Wasm Time and Jaco. We don't document like anything really there, but at the same time, it's up to those runtimes pointing to their book should be sufficient. Like I would assume the Wasm Time book has a whole section on Wasm Time run. And I'd rather not like redocument and then have that get out of date. So maybe updating the Wasm Time section to make sure it's pointing to the Wasm Time book, the Wasm Time guide, yeah. And seeing if things like Wasm Time Invoke are documented there. And honestly, if it's not, we should probably document that in the Wasm Time book, not in the component book. So, and then, so yeah, I would say remove 6.1, remove 6.3, and then in the next PR, figure out what we want to do with 6. I wouldn't try and do that all together.
Yeah. Yeah. The frequency with which I Jaco transpile things and then like run them in a browser, like specifically because there wasn't a Wasm Time Invoke, is like often. It's like very cool to hear that that exists, because I think it could like simplify a lot of the way that I go about actually running these things.
I'm creating issues to remove section 6.1 and 6.3, and I'm making the worst possible issues possible because they literally just say remove 6.1 and remove 6.3 with 0 context.
Cool.
Coming off mute to say it was great meeting everybody. I'll tag Victor. I'll tag you on the issue when I open it. But yeah, it's really great meeting everybody. And yeah, I'm very much in the learning the landscape mode, drinking from the fire hose mode. So yeah, I mean, if you think of anything that could be handy, I'm on the Zulip. You can reach out to me or ping me with stuff. So yeah, appreciate the time. So take care, everybody.
Thanks for coming, Pete.
Yep. Bye-bye.
I think Pete just did a good time check reminder on us. So I think we can close up shop. I feel like this was pretty productive. Any last comments? Cool. I'll talk to y'all next time.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
See y'all.